Hi everyone! So in the previous tutorial I've covered all the basics for TCG engine. In this one I'm going to show you how to create a cloud server and how to upload your game server build. So the first step to do that is that you're going to need to create a DigitalOcean account. You can actually use any other cloud server of your choice like Google Compute or Amazon. But in this example we're going to use DigitalOcean. And if you don't have an account already, I'll post a referral link. I think it gives you something like 2 months for free. So what I did, I've already installed WinSCP and Qt here. You have the links. And now we're going to go ahead and start with creating our droplet. So I am going to DigitalOcean. My account is already created. I'm just going to click on create droplet. You can choose any region that you like. I'm going to choose Toronto. And usually I like to use the latest LTS version of Ubuntu. For testing, I recommend this one here that has at least 2 CPU. But if you ever get more players, you probably will want to upgrade that. To be able to access your droplet, you will need to generate a SSH key. You can do this in PuTTyGen. If you install PuTTyGen, you can open it to create a new key and click generate. Just move around like this. It will create a new key. When it's done, you can click on save private key. Save it on your computer. And then you will need to copy this here, the public key. And if you click on new SSH key in DigitalOcean, you just copy it here. So you will need to do this. You will need to generate a SSH key. But me, I'm just going to continue this tutorial with the one I've already created before. Then you can give a name. I'm going to call this TCG engine test. Okay, everything seems good. So now I can create my droplet. So when it's done, DigitalOcean will give you an IP address that you need to copy. So there's 2 places where you will want to add this. First, if you go to Unity in network data, resource network data, you can copy your IP here. We're also going to copy it for the API, even though it's not installed yet. And now I'm going to go in WinSCP, and then you can copy the IP of your server here. The username for DigitalOcean, the default one is root. And then we're not going to put a password because we are using a SSH key. So we're going instead to click on advanced, SSH authentication, and then private key file. You can select your key that you've created in PuTTyGen. Click OK. Now I can save it, and we're going to double click on it to connect. Can click yes. And there you go. Now you're in the files of your server. So normally what I do is that I go back to the root folder, which is the slash, it's just a simple slash here. And I create a new directory called server. And inside this folder, I will create 2 new folders. One will be called game for the game server, and one will be called API for the API server. So I'm going to open game. This is the folder where I'm going to upload my server build. So for the server build, I want to make sure that my network data is set correctly. And then I'm going to go in build settings, clear all those scenes, and add the server scene instead. So this is the only scene you need for your dedicated server. Then I'm going to click on server build. If you're on a newer version of Unity, you will have dedicated server appear under the platform instead of this. And I'm going to choose Linux because our cloud server is on Linux. Okay, so now that our build is ready, we can just upload it to our new cloud server. Going to select all these files. You don't need to upload the folder that says do not ship. I'm just getting all these. Drag it in here in the right folder. And while this is uploading, I'm just going to go ahead and create my client build. So again, make sure that your client is connecting to the right URL. We're going to stay in test mode right now because the API is not installed yet. Going into build setting, I can remove the server. And now I'm going to add the login menu, all the menu basically, and my game scene. This one is not in use currently. It's an alternative to this one, and it can be changed in the gameplay data, but since we're using the 2D scene, then we can only include this one. Oh, I forgot to change here. You need to remove server build and then set to Windows. Okay, so these are the settings for the clients. I can click on build. And while this is building, I'm going to go on my server and try to start it. So if I click on comments, open in Putty, I can navigate to my new folder here. So server game. And then if you want to be able to execute the app, you need to change the permissions. So I'm going to do chmod 755, and then on this folder, the dot, it means in the current folder that you're. Okay, so now I should be able to execute. I can write dot slash and then TCG engine server and then press enter. Okay, so it says start server on this port, and then authentication is true because we are in test mode. So everything seems to be working. Now I will try to connect to it with my client. Just run it twice. And then if you click here and you know you're on the correct URL, and you click here and it says finding opponent, you already know that it's connecting successfully to your server. If it says, let's say I close my server here and I click on play multi, it will only show connecting to server. It will not show finding opponent because it's still trying to connect to the server and it can't. Okay, so now the problem with this approach, this command is very useful if you want to see the debug log. But as soon as I close this window here, my server will stop. So if I want the server to stay on all the time, I need to create a service. I'm going to show you how to do this. To create a service, you will need to go to this folder, system. And then you will need to upload a file that defines what is your service. I've already included the file here. It's called tcg.service inside the install folder. I can upload it here. And then you will want to double click on it to make sure that the path is correct. Maybe you have used the same path in the same file name for your server, but maybe you also choose something else. So here you will want to make sure that the working directory is correct, server/game, and also the path to the server is also the right one. So if you, when you did the build, if you gave it another name, then you will want to change this. You also have a path to your log file. In my case, it's also in the same folder. So if all the paths here are correct, then you should be good to launch your service. You need to remember the name of the file. In this case, it's TCG. So we're going to use this name to launch the service. So the command is system control start TCG, which is the name of the file. So I click enter, and now it should be running. I can run tab to see if it's running, and then I can see here in the list of process that I have the server running. Then I can Control C to quit this. And now even if I close the Putty window, it should still be able to connect to it. So let's try. Yeah, it's working. So now I can just click on it. Now it doesn't find each other because I'm on the same account, so need to remember that. I'm going to log out and try a different account. So mark 2. So now I have 2 different accounts. Now it should find each other. And our dedicated server is working. So this is it for the dedicated server. I hope it was simple enough. Now we're going to install the web API. This is a lot more complicated because you need to install a database. You also need to install NodeJS. So there's a few things you need to be able to install. But I think it's really worth to learn those things because that kind of API is really ideal to have user database and then user collection and save all that. It requires a lot less processing power than a Unity server. And also the other advantage of an HTTP API is that it can be accessed from anywhere. So if later you want to make a website or another application that need to access the same user data, then you will be able to, something that you will not be able to do if everything was stored in on your Unity server. So the first step to install the API is that we're going to unzip this folder here. It contains all the code for the API. One thing I would suggest you to do is to create a folder outside of your Unity project, because if you unzip it here, it will create a bunch of meta files that you don't need for Node.js code. So I'm going to copy it into a new folder here that I've created outside of my Unity folder and just unzip everything. Can delete this. We're going to go back to the installation. So here you have the step to install it locally. If you want to be able to do some development, I really suggest you to go and read those things. But for this tutorial, we're going to install it directly on the cloud server and skip the local installation. So all my API code is here. I'm just going to upload it to my server API folder. And click on comments, open in Putty. I can navigate to this folder. Now, even if you try to start it, it will not work because we have not installed anything yet. We did not install Mongo database and we didn't install Node.js, so we will need to do that. So to install a Mongo database, you can go into the documentation in this page and then follow these steps. It's going to open this link. And I'm going to show you all that. So you can basically just copy each line. To paste a line in the command line, you need to right click on the mouse. Okay, so this is done. I can just check this if it's correct. Then copy this one. Now I need to update my app packages. Now let's install it. And now you probably get an error because on that version of Ubuntu there's a problem with Mongo database, so I put a solution here. All you need to do is follow this step here to install libssl. So that's what it's saying here, that the dependencies are not met. So I'm just going to install libssl by copying those 3 lines. I will update again and then install. If you get this weird thing, it's just telling you to restart some services, so you can just press enter and it should be fine. Okay, now we will continue with our Mongo installation. So we were at this step. This is the one that didn't work. We'll try it again. Now it should work. Okay, it seems like it worked. Can go back to my installation. We'll just start Mongo and check if it's working. Then we can check the status to see if everything is fine. If it's green and it says active, then you're good to go. Now we're going to install Node.js and npm. You can do this with this line here. Okay, same thing for npm. Yes. If you get this, just press enter. Okay, so now both npm and Node.js are installed. So if you check in your API folder here, you will see that there's a package.json file. This file contains a list of all the external packages that are needed to run your Node.js API. So you will need to install those packages. The way you do this is first you navigate to the folder where your API is installed, and then you write npm install. Press enter. If you see here that you have some vulnerabilities, this only means that some of your packages are not up to date for this version of Node.js. So you can just run this command line here and it will automatically update the packages. Okay, so now we fix all the problems. I will also install forever using npm. This is what will allow us to install the Node.js app as a service instead of just directly in the command line. It's important to install it globally, otherwise it will only install it in the current folder that you're in. Now we're going to try to run the app. So I'm already in the right folder. I will write node server.js. And it seems like it's working. So now I'm going to go in Unity, go in network data and make sure that this is the right server. Also, you will want to remove HTTPS because we didn't install any SSL certificate yet. And you'll probably need to have your own domain name before you're able to do this. And I'm going to change the auth type to API. So now if I run Unity, now it's bring me to the login, and now I need a password. If you don't have a user, you can try to make a new one. And the way I've coded this in the latest version is that the very first user that you register will be an admin. And then after that, all the following users that are registered will be just regular user. So keep that in mind when you create your first user. I'm going to name it admin. Then you can just give it any email you want. I'm just going to write a password here that I can use later, and then use it for my admin. Click register. And now I'm also going to go and register a second user for myself. This one will not be an admin, it will just be a regular user. Click on register again. Now you should see here all the requests are being called. You don't see any errors, so it seems to be working. Now I can log in. Seems like our API is working already. Now we're going to run it as a service because this is the same problem that we had with the dedicated server. If I close this window, it will just stop. So I can do is forever start, give it a name, and then server.js. Now it should be running as a service. If I want to see if it's really running, I can do forever list, and it shows me that it's running here. And then the idea of giving it a name is that you don't need to use the number here to restart it. You can just do forever restart and then the name of your service. So whenever you upload files here, whenever you change any files in here, then you need to restart it. Now it should be working now again, but we're going to go in the config.js file. So here in this file you can change basically all the settings for the API. You have the port that it's using. I would recommend to keep that on the default HTTP port. You can add a SSH key here if you want to enable HTTPS. Here you have secret that is being used for authentication. I would recommend to change that to any random value. You can just type anything here as long as it's something unique. Then Mongo, right now we didn't enable authentication on Mongo. If you didn't enable anything, then you can just use the default settings. So basically Mongo is installed on the same Droplet, so that's why we have this host. This is the default port, so you don't need to change it, and then we just gave a name for the database. Then you have a lot of other different settings. In the documentation I show how to enable email sending. Then you have some more gameplay related values here. Now that we are connected to the API, if you go back to Unity and log in, I'll log in again. If I go in collection, it will ask me for a starter deck. I will choose one, but now it says reward not found. Why is it not found? It's because we have not uploaded all the data to our API yet. So it's trying to get the reward on the API, but it doesn't exist. If you go back to Unity, go in Scenes, Tools, and click on Card Uploader. You can run the scene. I'm going to get my admin password, write it here, and click on Upload. And this will upload all the data that we have in Unity to our database so that the API is aware of it. So now it should be working. If I go back to the menu scene, let's connect with my user, go to collection, and now I should be able to select one of the deck. There you go. Now you have your starter deck. Whenever you edit cards or data and you want the API to be in sync, you should re-upload everything to it. The next thing that we're going to do is to give API access to our game server, because we want the game server to be able to record all the winners of every match and also being able to give rewards to users. And to do that, it will need API access. To create our server user, we're going to do the same that we've done before. I'm going to open the login menu, register. I'm going to call it server, some email, and then I will give it a password. Click on register. But now this user will be created as a regular user. So what we will want to do is to grant a special permission, which will allow it to record all the matches that have been played and also give rewards to the players. And to change the permission of this user, what we can do is go in the scenes tool folder. There's a scene called change permission. I can run this scene. And now I will need to log in with the very first user that we've created, because this is the one that has the permission to grant permissions to other users. So I have the password here. Just type it here, log in, and then I can select which user I want to change the permission. I will write server because that's our new user that we've created, and I'm going to give it the permission number 5. You have the list right here. Update. And now it says success. So this user now should be able to give rewards to other users and act as a game server. Now I'm going to go in the scenes server folder, open the server scene. And if you click on the server object here, you will see the credential here to connect to the API with the game server. So the user is server, and then I will add my password here. Now you're ready to build your game server again. You can just clear those scene. Add this, and also to change to Linux. Okay, so let's build this. Okay, so now we can re-upload our game server. Make sure it's closed first. Okay, so the server finished uploading. We can just start it. Or actually, we're going to test it first. I will stop it, move to this folder. It's my API running. Okay, so now I'm just going to start everything then. Let's run the API first. Okay, now let's run the game server. It's the same file that we re-uploaded over, the chmod. You don't need to run it again. Now you will want to check if the authentication is true here. If it says false, it's probably because you have the wrong password here. By the way, when you do your client build, make sure to never include the server scene into your client build. Otherwise, anyone that tried to decompile the client could be able to find the server password here. So that's why this setting is not in resource network data like everything else, because I don't want to expose this to the client. So if you don't include this scene in your build setting, then it should be fine. It will not be in anywhere in the data. Okay, so since our server authentication is true and it seems to be working, it seems to be able to connect to the API. So now we can just run it as a service. Now we will also need to build the client again. Windows, put back your scene, and also in resources, network data, also make sure that is set to API here, that your URL are fine. We're going to add our game scene, build our client, and then let's go to our client build, try to connect to it. I will create another account so I'm able to play against myself, otherwise I won't be able to. Okay, let's try with a custom deck. I'll try to put cards of different colors. I should be able to purchase cards too. Let's buy some cards here, just so we have something different from the starter deck. Finish this. Okay, let's try to play with our custom deck here. Now it seems to be connecting, which is fine. All right. So yeah, it seems like the API is working because I have my custom deck. Also, now you can see that the avatars are not showing in reverse because they both don't have anything selected. Instead, I can just go back to the menu and I will pick an avatar and a card back. Let's take this. Let's pick the turtle. Let's try another match. Now it's showing in reverse because we have something assigned. And as you can see, I can see my card back here. So this is it for the cloud server installation. I hope this tutorial was useful. There's a few more steps that I would recommend to follow in the documentation, especially enabling HTTPS because you want all the passwords and credentials and all that to be encrypted when it's sent to the API. So you can just follow this step. I can't really show you with the current settings because you will need to own your own domain name. You can purchase one on Google Domains, for example, and then in the DNS settings, you redirect your domain to your server IP. Then after that, you can just follow all the steps here. Install Surbot, and then you will run a command after you finish all the installation. You will have this command here to create a SSL certificate. It will ask you a bunch of questions, and once your certificate is generated, it will appear in one of those folders. So it should show you where it is. And then in your NodeJS config, if you go here, then you can change these to the files that were generated by Surbot. And then add HTTPS to true here, so it's enabled. Then you will want to restart your NodeJS app. And once that is done, you can go back to Unity, Resources, Network Data, and just click the checkbox here. So that's pretty much it for today's tutorial. I hope it was helpful, and if you have any question or suggestion for a future tutorial, then you can just let me know by email or on Discord.